Thank you. So first of all, good morning, everybody, and Shavua Tov. Want to thank Amy and Brian, as always, for bringing us Micah and for making it possible for us to be connected. So Amy and Brian, thank you. Want to thank Micah for taking your time to share your ideas with us. We just love you so much and so appreciate your Torah. And want to thank everyone who is on this Zoom call to learn Torah with Micah. Micah, I'm going to be very brief by way of introduction. I read The Wandering Jew from the entire book to be able to have this dialogue with you, or mostly you're going to be lecturing or talking, and I have a few questions at the end. I just found it the most brilliant of all your books. I've read all of your English books in English translation. I haven't read the Hebrew ones, but I've read all the books you've written in English. This is my favorite one because it's ultimately about Judaism and meaning in our time. It's got the broadest aspiration. Like, how do we think about Judaism for the 21st century? I just love this book. I want to read it another two times for life, not just for this lecture. So I want to thank you for that. And I just want to turn it over to you. I think our format is going to be, Micah is going to just talk about the book for a while and talk about how we think. There's 1,000 ideas. If you've read the book, there's 1,000 ideas in it. He's going to share some of the most salient ones for today, January 17th, 2021, where Israel is at, where America is at, where the world is at. Then when he's done, I have a few questions that I want to ask him. And then I'm going to invite people to pose your questions to the chat function. And Amy Klein will read a few of those questions. So with that, Micah, thank you, and take it away.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you, everyone, for coming here tonight. I mean, I'm in Israel this morning. In the Middle Ages, Maimonides, Rabbi Yehuda Halevi, they were dealing with the following problem, which seemed to be a problem that was alive for many Jews. When you study philosophy and science, and you use your intellect, you use your rationality to understand the world, so it always seems like it contradicts Judaism. And this tension is always alive. Like, I don't know, you listen to Darwin's description of biology and how humanity evolved is very different than chapter 1 in Genesis. And this was there was a problem in the Middle Ages, not Darwin, they had Aristotle's science, but it was a living problem, and it's still a living problem. Like, what do you do with the contradiction between Torah and science, Torah and Mada, your revelation and your intellect? And this was a living tension for many people. I don't think this is a living tension for many young Israelis. And I'm not really sure it's a living tension for many Americans. I don't think this is where the problem is. This is the contradiction that's creating existential problems, that's creating that making people think twice whether they want to be Jewish and passionately Jewish and connected to Judaism, the fact that it contradicts science. I don't think that's the problem. And I think there's also great solutions and great theories about this, but that's not the living problem. Our living problem today is a different problem. And it's not a contradiction between sources of knowledge, science or revelation. It's a contradiction that comes from different human yearnings. We have two separate, modern people, postmodern people, we have two very passionate yearnings that tend to contradict each other. First yearning we want to be free. We want to express ourselves, to tap into our greatest talents and express them, to actualize ourselves, to become ourselves. Please, no one, don't tell me what to do. Don't tell me who I should be. I'm going on a journey to find myself and then actualize myself. That's my life's journey. That's a story that modernity is telling me. Let me free. Let me live my own life. Let's call this the challenge of liberty, of being liberated in order to actualize ourselves. That's one yearning we have. I don't think we have to say much about that yearning. It's so self-evident that we all have that within us. This is what we tell our children. Find yourself, actualize yourself, express yourself. That's a very important story. And this is a story that we live by, and it's a great modern yearning. Then we have another yearning. This is not the yearning to be free, liberated, self-actualize ourselves. It's a different yearning. It's a yearning to belong to something greater than ourselves. Where does this yearning come from? I think it comes from what Viktor Frankl calls our search, our quest for meaning. Now, many people have wrote about this, that sense that life has meaning. The soul somehow means something. That life has purpose. I find it a slippery feeling. Like sometimes I feel it, sometimes it's all empty. I don't. It's slippery. But there's a lot of research trying to figure out what is that feeling, that things are filled with meaning, that it has purpose. So many people wrote about this. Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, in his great book, Morality, wrote about this. Yuval Noah Harari wrote about this. Later, Viktor Frankl. What I'm trying to bring out from all these great writers, David Brooks wrote about this, Second Mountain. There's a lot of people writing about this problem of meaning. My conclusion is that meaning is born out of a different emotion, belonging, which means when I feel like I belong to a story that's greater than my life has meaning. When I don't feel like I belong to a story greater than my life tends to lose its sense of meaning. So meaning comes from belonging. Now that belonging, I think there's two components to belonging. One is having that feeling that there is a story that's bigger than our life, that began before us and will end after us. There is a larger story that we belong to. That's one component. The second component is that we matter. We are a part of that story. That our life matters, like we have a role in the larger story. And once you have those two components, there's a story you're a part of and your life means something, it somehow matters within that larger story, then our life has purpose. We feel like we're called to be greater than ourselves, to belong to something greater than ourselves. Okay, so those are two yearnings. We want to actualize ourselves and we want to belong to something greater than ourselves. In the book, I call it, we want to be free and we want to belong. The problem is they obviously clash. Because when I belong to something greater than myself, it obviously imposes limitations on what I can do and on who I am. It defines me. It limits me. It captures me. So the more I belong, the less free I am. And the other way around, what I'm saying, my life is about self-actualization. It's about me. It's about living my own life. So I have a lot of liberty, but not a lot of belonging. This, Rabbi, I think, is a great contradiction of our time. Not revelation and science, but liberty and belonging. Because we want to be free and we want to have meaning and belong. We want to actualize ourselves. We want to belong to something bigger than ourselves. And how do we manage this? This is the great conflict of our times. And for this is the conflict that creates perplexity. And this is what we need, a great guide for this perplexity, right? This is the greatest problem. This is a great problem of our time. And I think people who only belong and they give up liberty, they feel suffocated, but they're trapped in the story that's bigger than themselves. And people that only actualize themselves, they feel free, but many times they don't belong. So they feel there's no meaning and they feel empty. What's worse, losing your liberty or losing meaning? These are the problems of our time. Now here's a question. Is it possible to be connected to a greater story without being controlled by that story? Can we belong without losing our liberty? And I think that's true, and that is the greatest art of philosophy and religion of our time. How can we belong to a story without losing our own story? How do we do that? So I think Israel, or I think Israeliness, is one answer to that question. Rabbi, I don't think this is the only answer to that question, but it's one answer to that question, one possible answer to that question. And to understand how Israeliness could become an answer to that question, how can we belong to a story without being controlled by that story? we have to tell a little bit the story of Zionism the way it's not always told. So I'm now going into Zionism. Okay, we're going now into Zionism. So Zionism, the way it's almost always taught from the perspective of Theodor Herzl, right? It's always a story because we always imagine Zionism as a political project, an attempt of one visionary, Herzl, to create a political entity, a state of Israel that didn't exist before. So it's a political project. But according to most of the founding fathers, philosophers, thinkers, revolutionary, leaders of Zionism, it wasn't only a political project. It was much more than that. It was a therapeutic project. You see, according to people like Micah Yosef Berdichevsky, these were the greatest writers in the what we call the second Aliyah, the wave of immigration between 1904 and 1914 that planted the seeds of modern Israel. And like the Mayflower, okay, maybe that's it. Maybe it's a metaphor. And the way they understood it, there's something unhealthy in the personality of Jews. They have a not healthy personality. When I'm saying not healthy, I'm politically correct. They felt like it was a distorted personality, distorted character that Jews have. But as opposed to anti-Semites that hated the Jew, they wanted to heal the character of Jews. This was the passion of Brenner and Berdichevsky and many of the founding fathers of Zionism. Now, what's so, and the book, being some of the way they write, their rhetoric is very, they had a massive allergic reaction to what they saw, the character of the Jews. But they want to, so how do you heal this character? So the problem with the character is the following. The problem is that the way they saw it, Jews were always surrendering themselves. And when you constantly surrender yourself and not express yourself, you start developing a surrendering personality. Now, Jews throughout the generations, before the formation of the state of Israel, let's say if you're living in Lithuania in the 17th century, okay? So on the one hand, you're controlled by the Gentiles, by the non-Jews, and they're controlling your life. You don't control your own life. Your only way to protect your community is for the king to protect you from a possible pogrom. So you always need the king on your side, which means you're always trying to satisfy the king. And that created like this surrendering, submissive, satisfying Jew, which was always afraid of the non-Jew, always surrendering, always trying to, let me be a little bit blunt, always sucking up to them, which turned them into the way the founding fathers of Zionism saw pathetic Jews, always trying to please the non-Jews. That was one problem. Second problem is the Jews were not only controlled by non-Jews, they were also controlled by Judaism, books, these ancient books. We have to obey what it says in these ancient books. Rabbis, God. So you're controlled by non-Jews and you're controlled by Judaism. So you're living when you're controlled by not one, but two authorities. Now the theory here, this is actually Spinoza and Rambam's theory of personality, that we become, the sum of our habits become our character. If we're always surrendering to God and to the non-Jew, always, that's what you become. You become a personality filled with anxiety and fear and submissive. You're like a robot. You're not connected to your own will. You're only trying to ask, is this the right thing to do? Is this not right? Is this so? In my image, the way the founding fathers imagined the exilic Jew, the Galut Jew, their relationship with the Goyim made them pathetic because they're always trying to please them. and the Zionists found that behavior repulsive, and the relationship with God made them neurotic. Because you're always like, is this fleishik? Is this milchik? Is this the right thing? Yeah. Is this? Are you saying Baruch Shamar before movies? Like there's always, so you become like legalistic, and you become this neurotic, pathetic personality, filled with anxiety, filled with fear, not cheerful, not fun, not brave, not courageous, surrendering yourself, not expressing the richness that's within yourself. You know what? If we'll start with my opening contradiction, they were only belonging and never self-actualizing. They were only trapped in the larger story and never living their own story. So that's the critique of the founding fathers on the Yehudi HaGaluti, on the exilic Jew. When I say founding fathers, I'm thinking about three main people: Chernyakhovsky, Brenner, and Berdichevsky. And in my book, I try to dig deep into their writings and present them, especially Berdichevsky. So this is what's distorted about the Jew. This is what's not healthy in the character of the Jew. Let's heal the Jew. Now, here's the thing. How do you heal the Jew? So the movement, that its role is to heal the Jew, is Zionism. Isn't that an amazing, maybe even shocking understanding of what Zionism is trying to do? It's not trying to save the Jews from anti-Semitism. It was also about that. That's Herzl. It's supposed to heal the Jews, the personality of Jews, from their distortions. So maybe a weird, interesting way to think about this is someone wakes up in the morning and he or she feel like something's not healthy in their character and their personality. They want to change. They go to therapy. They sit with a psychiatrist, with a therapist for a few years, and they feel like they're changing. What happens when an entire nation wants to change its character? When an entire nation wants to heal what it feels like a distorted soul? How do you do therapy, not for an individual, but for a collective? Well, Zionism was an attempt to create therapy for the collective. That's the vision of Zionism. So I call this Berdichevsky Zionism as opposed to Herzl Zionism. It's not political Zionism, it's therapeutic Zionism, to heal the character of Jews. Okay, so how will Zionism do this? Well, you take the Jew out of Lithuania, one of those cold towns they live in. You bring him into Israel, and then something happens to them. First of all, they get a gun, they start working their ground, they're back to their bodies, they're back to the land. And most importantly, their fight for liberty is a double fight to liberate themselves from the control of the non-Jews. That's one aspect, but also, at least as important, to liberate themselves from the control of Judaism. This is what's important. I'll just try to put this together. If Zionism is an attempt to heal the Jew, and the Jew feels unhealthy because it's controlled by two authorities, so to heal the Jew, we need to liberate the Jew from two authorities, from the non-Jew and Judaism. So we have to create a state that's free. And, Ben Gurion said once about the UN, when he was trying to tell Israel what to do. Ben Gurion said the following line: Lo chashuv ma hagoyim yagidu, chashuv ma Yehudim yasu. And Israelis love that line because it captures the Zionist revolution. Lo chashuv ma hagoyim yagidu, chashuv ma Yehudim yasu. It doesn't matter what the goyim will say. It only matters what the Jews will do. Bang, that's Zionism. Don't tell me I'm not pleasing you anymore. I'm actualizing myself. That's one piece. But the second piece, not only that we're not controlled by the non-Jews anymore, we're not controlled by Judaism. Now, this is an important aspect. This is why secularism is an organic part of therapeutic Zionism. Because if it's a move for liberation, healing through liberation, transforming the Jew from a surrendering Jew to a self-actualizing Jew, to all be, Berdichevsky has a great line. He says, Ivrim anachnu ve'et libenu na'avod. Let me try to explain. Ivrim anachnu, we are Hebrews. Now this is Berdichevsky's way of saying, we're not Jews anymore. Jews are that that exilic, we're not Jews anymore. We are Hebrews. So it's a new identity. Ve'et libenu na'avod. And the only authority is our hearts. The non-Jews are not our authority anymore. The rabbis, they're not our authority anymore. The halacha is not the authority. Our authority is our heart, and to create a new Jew. As Jabotinsky puts this new Jew, it's an amazing line. Geza psychologi chadash shel Yehudim. A new psychological breed of Jews, which will be the opposite. Instead of being always afraid what they will say, what will God think, what will the non-Jew think, satisfying everyone, you don't care anymore. You just don't care anymore. It's not about what they think, it's about what you do. It's a courageous Jew, a brave Jew, a fearless Jew, a Nietzschean Jew in the sense that the ethos is now self-expression. We have rich personalities and we express the entire richness of our personality. We don't cancel ourselves. We don't surrender ourselves. So that was the great fantasy of what I call therapeutic Zionism. And this is why secularism is such an important part of what I call therapeutic Zionism. Let me just say something. Not all Zionism is therapeutic Zionism. There's other Zionisms. But the reason why it's important to learn this is it's hard to understand Israeliness without understanding the seeds that were planted in the second Aliyah, the second wave of immigration between 2004, 2000 was started World War I, not 2004, I mean 1904 and 1914. Those 10 years between the death of Herzl and World War I, those were the years where the ideological seeds of the passionate movement that will shape Israel were planted then by not political Zionists, but what I call therapeutic Zionists. Okay. Now I want us to look backwards and to be a little bit critical about this project. Because what you did was, if we start with a contradiction, a tension between liberty and belonging. So the exilic, frum Jew had no liberty, but he or she felt that they belonged to an ancient tradition. And there is a God that wants something from them. And there's a story that belongs to, and they're waiting for redemption. They belong to a great story. What did Zionism do? By disconnecting the Jew from their past, they replaced belonging with liberty. Now, I must say that the founding fathers of Zionism felt a lot of belonging to Zionism, belonging to this great project that they're the avant-gardes of this great project. Problem is, their children and grandchildren that felt a little bit less connected to Zionism also inherited their disconnection to Judaism. And as a result, we have a lot of liberty, but not a lot of belonging. But this brand of Zionism is not the only brand of Zionism at the time of 1904 to 1914. There was another great Zionist philosopher that challenged this brand of Zionism, this brand of very angry secular Zionism. And his name was Asher Ginsberg, known as Echad Ha'am. Now, Echad Ha'am's understanding of Zionism is that Zionism is a movement its purpose is not to heal the character of Jews, it's to heal the character of Judaism. Let me try to map this out. Herzl thought we're supposed to save the Jews from anti-Semitism. Belouzhevsky thought we're supposed to save the character of the Jews from its self-destruction and corruption. Chadam thought, no, our project is not to save the character of the Jews and not to save the body of the Jews. Herzl is to save Judaism. Now, now let me try to explain Echad Ha'am Zionism. It's a movement to heal not Jews, but to heal Judaism. So first of all, and there's two aspects to Echad Ha'am I want to share. Echad Ha'am, I think in many ways is the hero of at least half of this book, of my book, The Wandering Jew. I think he's a very important philosopher, one of the most relevant philosophers for the 21st century. And this is, I think, the Echad Ha'am move. He says, the frum relationship with the past is a relationship where you're controlled by the past. That's what it is. And that's an unhealthy relationship. But the Berdichevsky angry secular move is to disconnect yourself from the past. Well, I would say if being controlled by the past is an unhealthy relationship, being disconnected from the past, well, that's not a relationship at all. Now imagine, let's think about our relationship with our tradition as a relationship. Okay, now think about the relationships we have in our life. Some relationships are unhealthy because there's power involved. You control someone, or you're controlled by someone. That's an unhealthy relationship. But is the alternative to that relationship ending the relationship? That's what Berdichevsky thought. My only way to liberate myself from the past is to end my relationship with the past. It's like I have two bad options. Bad option number one, not to have a relationship with Judaism, with my tradition. Option number two, to have a sick relationship with Judaism, because it's going to control my life. I think Echad Ha'am comes and he says, no, there's a third option. The alternative to having a sick relationship with our past is not to end the relationship, it's to heal the relationship. What does healing the relationship look like and feel like? I think the result of the healing is that you feel intimately connected to Judaism. But you're not controlled by Judaism. Let me say that again. You're intimately connected to our past, but you're not controlled by the past. In my own experience, it's like the difference between maybe your tough commander in basic training, which is trying to control your life, or your relationship with your wise grandfather. What's the difference? Well, my commander is trying to control my life, but my wise grandfather, he's not controlling my life, but I'm very much connected to him. I'm connected to him. I derive inspiration from him, but he's not controlling me. Can Judaism turn from the tough commander to the warm grandfather or grandmother? That's how Echad Ha'am wants to see it. And a contemporary, I think the most important modern articulator of Echad Ha'am is Amos Oz, which I'm sure is a writer that many of you read his translations. And he has an interesting image. He says, imagine someone had a complicated relationship with their grandfather or grandmother. And then they die, and you inherit everything they own. So imagine there's two types of, let's call it, unsophisticated inheritors. Unsophisticated inheritor number one is a person that comes and says, hey, this is my grandfather, this is my grandmother, I miss them so much, I love them so much. Everything they've ever touched has sentimental value. Everything they own is going into my house. So you start putting all their, their couch and the chairs and the table, everything, all their junk, everything goes into your house. Now, after you just pack it all in, because it was my grandparents and I'm so connected to them, how will your house look like? Well, first of all, it won't look like your house, right? There won't be a lot of room there for you. Okay, so maybe it wasn't such a good idea just to inherit everything they've left you. Here's option number two. Your grandfather said something not nice to you. Your grandmother there was a problem there. You're so angry. You throw everything they're leaving you. You're not going to touch it. you throw it all away. You throw it all away. You throw the diamonds. You throw the jewelry. You throw things that are so valuable. You throw it all away because you're so angry at them. Amos says, like the frum people, everything that Judaism is, that went for every asset that goes from generation to generation, because it's ancient, because it's sacred, should be a part of my life. And the angry secular Israelis, the Berdichevsky Israelis, they're saying, oh, this is what, corrupted our personality. They're so angry. They're throwing it all away, including the pearls, the diamonds, the jewelry. So what are we supposed to do? What does it mean to be the greatest art of all cultural arts? Is how to inherit your tradition wisely. Like, what am I gonna bring into my house and maybe shape it up a bit so it'll fit into my living room? What am I, I'm not gonna use it. I'm gonna keep it in the basement for, maybe I'll need it one day. There's some things that are so not connected to my life. I might throw them away, but there's some things that I will definitely cherish. That's how you should have a better relationship with your past. This is the vision of Echad Ha'am. The alternative to being controlled by the past is not ending our relationship with the past. It's healing our relationship with the past. Now, which takes me to the second part of Echad Ha'am. Why is Zionism an opportunity to heal our relationship with the past? This is Echad Ha'am's critique of people who did not participate in the grand project of Zionism. Okay, so I'm just saying this as a trigger warning. Some people might experience this as the Echad Ha'am criticizing them personally. In Newton in 2021. Is that okay, Rabbi? Is that okay? Okay. If people will be pissed off, they'll take it out on you, probably not on me. So, okay. So Echad Ha'am has a very interesting move. He calls al parashat drachim. By the way, his Hebrew is amazing. He's just a great writer. Parashat drachim means you're a road that now is split. There's two different ways Jewish history can go. You could take a right, you could take a left, but you have to choose. You have to choose your path, and right in the middle, on the crossroads. And this is Echad Ha'am's theory: modernity with modern values and modern science and modernity is going to crush Judaism. It's going to destroy Judaism. And if we stay modern and open and liberal, we might lose our Judaism. So he looks at the Charedim, at the ultra-Orthodox, and then they're saying, modernity might destroy Judaism, so what should we do? Avoid modernity. I remember 3 years ago, there was, excuse now my ignorance, in Florida, do they have tornadoes or hurricanes? Excuse my ignorance. Hurricanes. Okay. So remember 3 or 4 years ago, there was a massive hurricane in Florida. And we were watching this because my wife has family in Miami. And then suddenly, I think it was the mayor of Miami comes on TV and he says, anyone that has a car, get in your car and fill it up with the gas and leave Miami. And we thought that was usually leaders, their role is to calm people down, because the real damage doesn't come from the threat, it comes from panicking, a reaction to the threat. When he said that, he probably realized the threat is so big, the hurricane is so massive, that the threat is larger than the potential damage of our reaction to the threat. So he said, just get in your car and run away. And what he's trying to say is something important. There's a hurricane coming that will destroy everything it goes through. If you're not there, it won't destroy your life. I think this is how ultra-Orthodoxy understands modernity. It's a hurricane that's going to destroy Judaism. So how do we protect Judaism? We get in our car and we escape the hurricane. Modernity to destroy everything that's in its way. Let's make sure we're not in its way. Let's make sure that we are disconnected from modernity. Now, Echad Ha'am has the following problem. He thinks ultra-Orthodoxy is right socially and wrong theologically. meaning it's right. Modernity is going to destroy Judaism. The only alternative we have is to shut down from modernity. But Chadam argues, if you shut down from modernity, you're going to distort Judaism. It's going to become the kind of Judaism that you don't want to be a part of. Because what does it mean to close yourself down from modernity? It means you have to do two things to Judaism. One, you have to close Judaism, like no foreign influence. And Judaism was always open to foreign influence. Look at Maimonides. It was always open to the world. So closing Judaism is distorting Judaism. The second change that ultra-Orthodoxy is offering is to freeze Judaism. To freeze Judaism, because if everything is changing, the only way not to be swept away with the change of modernity is not to change. You know the joke, how many Orthodox rabbis does it take to change a light bulb? Change? We don't do change, okay? So you don't change, no changing light bulbs, no change, right? So, and you can understand why. If the world is changing and we don't want to be a part of the world of change, we just don't change. And these are two guarantees. We won't be swept away and destroyed by the hurricane called modernity. Freeze Judaism, close Judaism. That's how you save Judaism. But the price is that you distort Judaism, because Judaism always changed and Judaism was always open, which means the only way to save Judaism is to distort Judaism. Now, Chadam says, listen, there's a big problem here. Because it seems like we have two options and they're both very bad options. Bad option number one, shut it down, freeze it, distort it, and guarantee its continuity and save it. Bad option number two is don't distort it. Open it up. Embrace change. Breathe in every new idea. But the result is you're threatening the future of Jewish continuity. Now, these are two bad options. Now, I think, and this is I think, history proved that the analysis of the Echad Ha'am seems, statistically speaking, very correct. The more Judaism is more frozen and closed, the more it's guaranteed, its continuity is guaranteed. And the more it's open, and the best version of Judaism is also the kind of Judaism that doesn't seem like it really is reproducing a continuation in a powerful way. It's shrinking. So you have two very bad options. What's worse, threatening Judaism or distorting Judaism? And Chadam says the role of Zionism is to save us from these two bad options. Creating an option where you can open Judaism, change Judaism, without threatening Jewish continuity. So for Echad Ha'am, healing our relationship with our past means creating a relationship with our tradition where we're not controlled by it. For that, we have to kind of change Judaism, and we can only change Judaism if there is an Israel, if there's a framework where you could do it without threatening your continuity. So that Echad Ha'am option is, I think, the third option and maybe the most important option we have today. When we have Herzl, which is very important, I think Netanyahu represents Herzlian Zionism. Herzlian Zionism is, there's anti-Semites, we need a safe refuge to protect Israel from the Jews, from people who hate Jews. That's one way of thinking about Zionism. A second, we need to liberate ourselves from the past and from Gentile. That's Zionism. It's only liberation. And Echad Ha'am is Zionism is the opportunity to heal Judaism, and as a result, to heal a relationship with Judaism where I can be intimately connected to my tradition without controlled by my tradition, where these books can be a source of inspiration, but not a source of authority. They can enrich my life, but not control my life. That option, argues the Echad Ha'am, that's what Zionism does to Judaism, and that's the purpose of Zionism, to heal our Judaism, not to heal the Jews. So that's in a nutshell, I think, different options we find within the innovation called Zionism and Israeliness. Rabbi, so that's, I think, that's my attempt to open up different options. So now we can continue the conversation if this is.
Perfect. I thank you. Could you just tell, I happen to, in preparation for this hour, I happen to have listened to the podcast of the dialogue with you and Yehuda Kurtzer that Amy had sent to a lot of us. And you tell the story. I mean, your stories are always so great at concretizing your points. Could you just tell the story to the group this morning about your commander, your fearsome commander, and what you associated with him? And then you saw him once and had a reaction. Then you saw him later and had a reaction. Because I feel like that story of you and your commander concretizes a lot of what you're talking about.
Yes. So Berdichevsky thinks the Chad Ha'am was wrong. He's saying, you can't heal your relationship with Judaism. Judaism is a dictator. Will always try to control you. You'll always reaction to Judaism will never be something inspiring and enriching. It will always be authority that's trying to control you. That's Berdichevsky saying to Echad Ha'am. And here's my understanding. We all have this experience in our life where there was a figure that carried a lot of authority. And then one day we meet this figure stripped from his or her authority. And then can you have a new relationship with them? Can we have a relationship with them without their frightening authority? So that's what the Echad Ha'am is trying to do. Let's have a connection with Judaism without being controlled by Judaism. It means let's be enriched and inspired by the tradition without its authority. Is that possible? So when I was in the military, I had a commander, which his name is not Nachshon, but I call him in the book Nachshon. This is in basic training. And I was the kind of, among my many weaknesses, I'm also a very clumsy guy. Like, I have a tendency to lose things. Never give me anything. Here's advice. Never give me anything. Okay. It'll probably go into the laundry or something. I lose things. Now that's a problem, but when you're in the military, it's a very big problem because you get punished for losing things. You get punished. So I remember when I was in the military in 1993, every night, Nachshon used to take me away from the base. He used to make me run up this hill, up a hill, down a hill, up a hill. And I was carrying everything I lost that day on my back. So everything, all the stuff I had to carry, and I would lose it while I'm running. It was so I remember this as a nightmare. And going up and down, up and down. And I even got in trouble once because, I don't think I write this in the book, because he caught me. I realized the only way I could pull this off, run all the way up to the hill and come back on time, is not to run away all the way up the hill, just to run halfway up and then turn. And then he caught me cheating and they put me in a courtroom and it was all, okay. So I'm sharing this with you partially as group therapy. I'm sharing this with you as group therapy, but also I'm sharing this with you because like 11, 12 years later, I'm teaching Rambam, Maimonides in Hebrew University. And after I'm ending the class, I'm walking down the corridor of Hebrew U with my students, and was discussing Rambam and Aristotle, and suddenly, in front of me, I see my commander from basic training, and my heart starts. I feel like I'm a minor panic attack, and I say, "Shalom, shalom, Nachshon." I'm trying to be cool. I'm trying to hide the fact that I'm panicking, and very quickly, I continued walking, and while I'm walking away, and I'm getting my breath back, I'm asking myself, Micha, why are you afraid of him? He's not your commander anymore. Actually, if you think about it, I don't know what he did with his life, but here I'm a professor in Hebrew U, and he's just a student in year one. Like it's the other way around now. Why are you afraid of him? So I said to myself, next time you see HaMefaked Nachshon, Commander Nachshon, don't see HaMefaked Nachshon. Just see Nachshon. See him stripped from his authority. So I remember I saw him next to the library a few days later. I was going to go up to him, and I just left. I couldn't do it. This is Berdychevsky's argument. Berdychevsky's argument that for so many years Judaism was its authority. The Echad Ha'am project can't work. Every time people will go to shul, they'll start singing, listening, and that unhealthy personality all over again. That's what's going to happen. And the Echad Ha'am knows it's possible to take Judaism, they take its values, its ideas, its inspiration without it controlling you. It's possible. Now, from my experience, with my mefaked, with my commander, I understood what Berdychevsky means. Judaism, or someone that had authority, never loses its authority. But about years later, okay, 20 years after I graduated the army. Oh, I remember one more thing I told myself. I said, if every time I see Mefaked Nachshon, I panic, you know what that means? I'm 11 years after I graduated the Israeli military, and I'm still in the military. I'm still in the army. I never really emotionally graduated. I never left the army. So 10 years pass, and I'm in Machane Yehuda. You know where that is? The market in Yerushalayim. And I see Nachshon. Now I see him again, and suddenly, there's no mefaked. My heart is beating normally. No panicking. I just see Nachshon. It's all gone. Hey, Nachshon. Hey, Micah. How's it going? Let's have some coffee. We have coffee. We drink some coffee with each other. We have a great, great talk. And he turns out he's a great guy. He's a funny guy. He's a little bit weird. I really like him. We really connected. These great stories. And I realized, wow, I just connected with Nachshon without his authority. And I realized it took me 20 years to leave the army. Then I knew I'm out of the army. So this is my analogy. I think Echad Ha'am could work, but it takes time. I think first, second generation of secular Jews in Israel, they thought that every time you'll see Judaism, you'll see authority. So they were rebelling against it. Now there's a new generation of Israelis that feel so safe and secure in their secularism, they can now tap into Judaism without it turning into authority. It doesn't echo authority for them anymore. The reason why so many young Israelis are now starving for an intimate connection with Judaism without becoming religious, which means they want to be connected to tradition without being controlled by it. The reason why something can only happen in the third and fourth generation is because, for the same reason, 10 years after the military, I saw Mefaked Nachshon. 20 years after, I saw just Nachshon. Secularism has matured, and the maturity of secularism is what enables the phenomenon like Beit Parat.
So Micah, so thank you.
Okay.
Now, your book and your lecture this morning are just so brilliant, on point about Israeli Judaism and all the tensions that you've talked about, and how to heal the past and not be controlled by the past are so perfect for the Zionist story in this generation. Could you just talk about the message of your book and of your lecture for American Judaism? How do American Jews heal our relationship with the past? How do American Jews renew our connection to Judaism? Put it this way, I'm looking at the backdrop of your talk, and I'm looking at a room of Beit Parat, 20-something post-army Israelis. If those were American Jewish, if those were our children and our grandchildren who are kind of thinking about how do I reconnect, what's your message to American Jews and American Judaism?
First of all, I don't have a very good answer to you, Rabbi. But first of all, I want them to know that, first of all, let me try to articulate why I think there's a crisis of identity for American Jews, okay? Instead of giving you an answer, I'll try to expand the problem, okay, Rabbi? So a sense of belonging could come for us in two different ways. One, there's God, and the second is peoplehood. Now, if God works, if you feel connected to God and you want to connect to God, the best way to connect to God is through rituals. Now, rituals are very powerful because rituals always connect you to other people that are performing those rituals. And that's why in our attempt to connect to God, we connect to other people because we go to shul and then we meet people and we're connected to them. And as a result, one of the greatest consequences of our attempt to connect to God is that we're connected to community. And then something happened in modernity. People stopped believing in God, or they don't believe it's possible to connect to God. And what they didn't realize is that by doing that, they're not connected to other people. And they're more lonely, they have less community. So first of all, is it possible for young people who are skeptical about God to perform in rituals that connect you, that you're not sure if they connect you to God, but you know for sure that they connect you to other people and they give you the gift of community. And my best definition of community is a group of people that are witnessing each other's lives. One of the worst problems of our 21st century lives is the sense that you're lonely and that you're anonymous, that you're not connected to other people and you're not seen. And I think people try to break that sense of being anonymous using social media. Look at me, right? I just bought an apple. I'm eating it now. Selfie, I'm eating an apple. This is not that far-fetched. Every day, people are asking social media to liberate themselves from liberty, from anonymity. And by the way, digital attention is not real attention. It never gives you a sense that you're seen. It only increases, it's an illusion of being seen. It only increases a sense of anonymity. A second place we'll search for a place to be seen is in angry political tribes, where we're all, which an angry political tribe, what we share is not our connection to each other, but our hate for another tribe, for a different tribe. That's what we all saw last week with a brainwashed mob storming Capitol Hill. So much hate for other tribes. This is also another way we try to redeem ourselves from anonymity and from loneliness. The only thing that works is community, which what we share is not our hate for someone else, it's our connection to ourselves. And religious rituals work. That's one challenge. When people are skeptical about religious rituals, so they don't perform the rituals because they don't believe in God, as a result, they're not connected to the other people that perform the rituals with them, that would perform the rituals with them. That's one question. Can we restore religious rituals? That's the challenge. That's, I think, the biggest challenge. The second thing is another way to belong is to belong not to God, not to connect to God, but peoplehood. Now, to cultivate a sense of belonging to people, Israel is very important, because when you're connected to Israel, when you feel that when something bad happens to Israel, something bad happened to you. When Israel does something bad, you feel a little bit shame yourself. Like it's a sense of expansion of your ego. Then you have a belonging. There's something very powerful. Then you have a belonging that's balancing, you're self-actualizing, then you have more meaning. But what happens when people are disconnected from Israel? When you're disconnected from Israel, it's very hard to cultivate a sense of belonging to a people. And as a result, your sense of identity shrinks. So I think these are our two biggest challenges: God and peoplehood, and the glue that connects us to God is rituals. And the most important glue that creates a sense of peoplehood for American Jews for many years was the state of Israel. Well, if there's a crisis of rituals and a crisis of Israel, no connection to God, no connection to peoplehood, we're all alone. So I think we should work hard on making rituals more exciting and making Israel more attractive. And I think what my book tries to offer American Jews is making Israel is not only its politics. We have to think, besides Israel, there's also Israeliness. And Israeliness is powerful, it's alive, it's interesting, it's inspiring, and be a new channel for American Jews to connect to their peoplehood through Israel is not only through their very complicated relationship with Israel's politics, but also Israeli culture, Israeli spirit, Israeli Judaism, what I call Israelism.
So, Micha, wait a minute. Let me just engage that for a second. In your book and in other talks you've given, you talk about 4 factors about Israeli Judaism that guarantee Achad Ha'am's vision that Israeli Jews will heal their past. Number 1, they speak Hebrew. Number 2, all their friends are Jewish. Number 3, they're living in the land of Israel, which is just where Jewish history takes place. And number 4, the calendar. You know, Tu B'Shvat is a whole big deal. I mean, it's natural. You've got Hebrew, you've got Jewish friends, you've got the land of Israel, you've got Jewish time, and all that is going to guarantee a next generation of Jews. Here's my question to you, and just candidly, America is not Israel. We don't speak Hebrew, we speak English. Our friends are not all Jewish, they're, diverse, and our calendar is not Tu B'Shvat. So are we screwed or do we have hope?
I said, people that lost faith in the Jewish people always got it wrong. I would never bet against the Jewish people. But the fact that all I want to say is, in Israel, we're facing an opportunity. And there's an opportunity we see among young Israelis that have a matured form of secularism. And now what are we going to do with that? Can now we bring the best out of Judaism in order to bring the best out of ourselves and to create a different Israel? That's the opportunity. West, we might not be able to do that. We might screw it up. An opportunity is an invitation for action, and it might not work. In America, you're not facing an opportunity, you're facing a crisis. The crisis might not happen. The crisis is very similar to an opportunity. It calls you to action. And crisis calls you to action because you have to change in order not to bump into the iceberg. Yes. And opportunity calls you to action, or else you'll miss, you won't seize the opportunity. So I think both Israelis and Americans need to change. You need to wake up.
Okay.
And the tragedy of screwing up, and we could screw up in both. I mean, how sad will it be, Wes, if 20 years from now, this great opportunity, this moment presented in front of us will be lost? How sad will that be? So I'm in the business, the bait prop business is capturing the Israeli opportunity. And I think you're in the business of dealing with the crisis of American Judaism, but it's similar in the sense that they both are creating what Martin Luther King called a sense of urgency. We have to do something now, right now, before something else happens.
So, Micha, let me ask you two last questions, and then we'll close out. In terms of urgency, I mean, everything that you said and everything that you wrote stands alone and is apart and independent and autonomous and beautiful. But there's 2 things that your book doesn't deal with, and that your lecture doesn't deal with, that is on everybody's mind now, and I want to know how that relates to the whole project you're talking about. One is the pandemic. Your book is written pre-pandemic, and the other is the extreme toxic political divide.
Yes.
In America and also in Israel. We're at toxic politics and toxic pandemic, and how can Judaism be helpful? And how is Judaism affected by each, and how can Judaism be helpful for both?
Yes. So I want to say something. I'm not saying this to show off. I got my vaccine today. I'm 46. And they said in the newspaper this morning that Israelis that are over 45 could sign up for a vaccine. I signed up. It told me 3 hours you can get a vaccine in somewhere in Jerusalem. I went there within 5 minutes. I got my vaccine. We're doing the Pfizer trail. So in 3 weeks, the second one, and then I'm out of COVID. And I know, and I'm not unique. 2.5 million Israelis already got their vaccine. I think Israel is already 27 or 28% of Israelis are vaccinated. What percentage of Americans are vaccinated by now? I think 3% or 3 point something percent, right? And people that in America that deserve a vaccine much more than I do are not vaccinated. In Israel, young people are not getting vaccinated. So in Israel is becoming a success story, a massive success story. It's going to be the first country in the world out of COVID. Now this reminds us something, that Israel has energy, it has strength, it has creativity, it has powers that other countries don't seem to have. But here's my question. Israel has the potential of becoming a role model society. Now we should ask, a role model society for what? And the narrative that we've been using for the past 20 years, the most dominant narrative telling that Israel is amazing, it's a role model society, is the startup narrative. Israel is a startup nation. Israel has more companies and NASDAQ than all of Europe together, or something like that. Israel is the land of high tech and innovation. I'm not crazy about that narrative. It's true, it's great, it's amazing, I'm proud. But the kind of Israel that does the following, brings the best out of our past in order to bring the best out of our present, brings the best out of Judaism in order to bring the best out of our Israelism. That's a kind of Israel that's a different role model. And what kind of role model? Well, here's a vision I would like to share. And this has to do with your second question, Rabbi. When we saw a brainwashed mob storm Capitol Hill with so much hate, we should know that when they were in Capitol Hill, in their mind, they're now entering Hitler's bunker in 1945. That's where they think they are. And for them, that's an absolute reality. Now, there is a reason why they're brainwashed. There's a reason why there's so much hate in the hearts and minds of those people, because there's so much hate not only in their hearts and minds. There's more hate than ever in America today. Robert Putnam from Harvard, he says America is more polarized than it was throughout the entire 20th century. The last time this level of polarization, of hatred, where people hate each other just because of their political worldview, it reached this level was in the 1860s. Doesn't mean you're entering civil war, but it means it's not a good. And America's not alone. Brazil is extremely polarized today. Argentina is polarized. Poland is polarized. Hungary is polarized. The Great Britain, our British friends, it's hard to imagine how polarized they are, how much they hate each other just because of, if someone, Brexit, right? What you think about Brexit makes you hate you so much. Oh, by the way, Israel, we're entering our fourth elections, Rabbi. Fourth elections in 2 years. We used to be proud we're the only democracy in the Middle East. Now we say there's way too much democracy, right? So something's wrong. Something's dysfunctioning. And what's happening is, I think Marshall McLuhan might be the prophet of this moment, where he says, if you see a phenomenon and you can't explain it, maybe it's not the message, it's the medium. Like, oh, it's progressivism, oh, it's populism, oh, it's like, maybe there's an idea that's destroying the world. And Marshall McLuhan is teaching us, maybe it's not the ideas, maybe it's not the problem with the messages, maybe it's a problem with the medium. Let me just say one thing about the medium. And this is something I'm working on now a lot. How can the medium polarize us? Well, the algorithm of Facebook that decides what, and I spoke about this in Temple Emmanuel, right?
Right.
The algorithm that decides what information you'll be exposed to has only one criteria, and that is what piece of information, if it's a video or a post or something, will grab your attention. It's the doorman of information, right? It decides what you're going to see, what you're not going to see. And it doesn't select bits of information according to the question is what's more aesthetic, what's more moral, what's more beautiful, what's more true, what's more fact-based. No, only one question. What's going to grab your attention? Because the economic model is that, as Tim Wu from Columbia puts it, they're attention merchants. They grab your attention and sell your attention to advertisers. So if attention is worth money, how do you grab your attention? And here's 3 problems human beings have. 1, our own opinions grab our attention more than other people's opinions. Like if I tell you something, Rabbi, that you already think, you're gonna be more interested if it's something that you like. So your own opinions grab your attention. As a result, the algorithm feeds us with what we already think. So you're brainwashed because repetition creates brainwashing. But you're brainwashed by yourself. Eli Fraser calls this auto-propaganda. You're brainwashed. The same messages again and again. You're trapped in your own worldview. That's one problem. The second problem is fake news grabs more attention than news. Because fake news is always more interesting. It's always more sensational. And this is also scientifically checked. Fake news becomes more viral than news. And three, this is very, very sad. Out of all the array of our emotions, the emotion that's most viral, the emotion that we're exposed, it grabs our attention, is not gratitude. It's not awe. It's not beauty. It's not even a good joke. The emotion that grabs our attention more than any other emotion, this is something that the algorithms know, is rage. So if somebody writes a post filled with rage, it'll be prioritized by the algorithm of Facebook. You'll get rage. So as a result, if rage is more viral and fake news is more viral and our own opinions grab our attention, people are living in bubbles where they're exposed to their opinions again and again, filled with rage and not based on facts. And as a result, the world is divided into tribes of bubbles of separate information where people are brainwashing themselves with their own views, not based on facts and filled with rage. This is the world we live in.
Micah, how do we heal that? I mean, your diagnosis is 100% accurate.
Okay.
How do we heal that? And
So
how can you help us?
This takes me back to your first question. We need to start dealing not only with the message, but with the medium. By the way, it's hard because the medium, we never see the medium because we see through the medium. So we don't look at the medium. And this is, I think, this should be the most important project of our time, to heal our relationship with technology. And this is a very big question. I think there's three efforts that need to be done here. One, a cultural efforts. The world is suffering from a massive attention deficit. We just pay less attention. How do we shut down that attention deficit? All right. There's an economic deficit because of COVID. There's also an attention deficit. How do we close the attention deficit? We need to be very aware culturally of this. I want to lead a move in Israel where different high schools have a covenant of how we treat our smartphones. How do we treat Facebook? Youth movements have to have a covenant. The military in Israel can become an exemplary digital society. How do we do like a cultural movement where we make sure that we use technology, but technology doesn't use us? That's one question. A second question is political regulation. What's the best practices for politics to regulate technology? And the third is economic. We have to start developing technology that can liberate us from technology. Just like there's green technology protecting planet Earth from the Industrial Revolution, we need the equivalent of green technology to protect our democracies from the digital revolution. So these are different moves. And I want to say, I think Israel could lead the world when it comes to this. And this takes me back to your first question, and with this I'll end. The historic nation today is that Israel is leading the world in developing technology. That's nice. What Or LaGoyim means, what exemplary Israel would mean, if Israel doesn't only lead the world in inventing technology, Israel should lead the world on how we deal with technology, on how we protect ourselves, our societies. And here I think, Wes, when it comes to this question, we have a lot yet to tap into the best of our Judaism, to bring the best out of our past, in order to lead the world not only in developing technology, I think that should be the future of Zionism.
Wow. Micah, we cannot thank you enough. What a brilliant morning. We're so grateful to you for your wisdom and your Torah. You know, I leave this conversation with so much to think about, which is always the litmus test of a great hour of learning, is you have much more to think about when you leave than when you come in. Thank you so much. We love you. We miss you. may COVID be over soon so we can actually see you in person, either in Israel and or in Newton. Amy and Brian, thank you. And Amy, do you have just a last message about our next meeting?
Last message is we will hopefully see you all on Sunday morning, February 7th for Alana Stein-Hain. And yet another plug for the Friday midday Hartman at Home email, because that's where we'll post the recording of this lecture and other lectures by Micah and other Hartman scholars. So that's where you want to check every Friday. And Micah, thank you. On your technology thing, maybe you should write a book.
Yeah.
I'll take that into consideration.
Thank you all so much.
Thanks for being here. Bye-bye, guys.